I never imagined at 58 years old I'd be sitting alone in my living room on Christmas morning, staring at an unopened bottle of champagne and a table set for 5 that would only serve 1. The reflection of twinkling lights from my meticulously decorated tree danced across the golden foil of carefully wrapped presents, gifts that might never be opened. My phone sat silent on the coffee table, its screen dark and unforgiving. No calls, no texts, no excuses this year. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My children had finally stopped pretending they wanted to come home for the holidays. The house felt impossibly large that morning. The 4-bedroom colonial in Oakridge that had once burst with laughter, arguments, and the chaotic energy of family life now echoed with a silence that physically hurt. Thomas and I had bought it 30 years ago when the kids were small and our dreams were big. Now, 2 years after his sudden heart attack, it had become a museum of memories I wandered through alone. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I'd done everything right, or so I thought. I was the mother who never missed a soccer game or dance. Recital. The one who baked cookies for every school event and stayed up all night finishing science projects. I'd put my own dreams of going back to school for interior design on an indefinite hold because my family needed me. I was the glue, the heart, the constant, and I'd been proud of that role. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted. My 3 adult children, Nora, 32, Daniel, 29, and Eliza, 26, had gradually withdrawn from my life, their visits becoming shorter, their calls more perfunctory. I told myself it was normal, that they were building their own lives in different cities. Denver, Chicago, Boston, each one seemingly determined to put as much geographic distance between us as possible. This Christmas was just the final confirmation of what I'd been denying for years. They'd coordinated their excuses this time. Nora couldn't get away from her surgical residency. Daniel had planned a ski trip with his girlfriend's family. Eliza had a can't-miss opportunity to network at her boss's holiday party. Each one delivered with practiced sympathy but underlying relief. I took a sip of my now cold coffee and gazed out at the pristine blanket of snow covering my front yard. The neighbors across the street were unloading their car, grandchildren spilling out in colorful winter coats, arms filled with presents. I drew the curtains. That's when I noticed the forgotten lottery ticket tucked into the ceramic bowl where I kept my keys. I'd bought it on impulse 2 weeks earlier when picking up eggnog at the corner store. The clerk's cheerful, "Someone's gotta win the holiday mega jackpot," momentarily lifting my spirits. I hadn't even bothered to check the numbers after the drawing. With nothing better to do, I pulled out my iPad and searched for the winning numbers. I expected nothing. My small acts of optimism rarely panned out these days. But as I compared the numbers to my ticket, my hands began to shake. I checked 3 times, convinced I was seeing things, that grief and loneliness had finally pushed me into delusion. But the numbers didn't change. 6 matching figures that transformed my worthless piece of paper into a $237 million winning ticket. I collapsed back into my armchair, breath coming in short gasps. $237 million. It was incomprehensible, absurd, and suddenly terrifying. Because my first instinct, the thought that flashed through my mind before all others, wasn't joy or relief or excitement. It was, now my children will want to see me. The realization sat heavy in my chest, bitter and clarifying. Was that what our relationship had come to? That only the promise of wealth could bring them home? The question burned, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths I'd been avoiding for decades. I didn't call them right away. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I tucked the ticket into Thomas's old leather-bound copy of Great Expectations and took a long, hot shower. As the water washed over me, I found myself crying for the first time since the kids had canceled Christmas. Not from sadness, but from the strange, unsettling freedom of clarity. I'd spent 30 years being Patricia the provider, Patricia the nurturer, Patricia the always available. I'd defined myself solely through the lens of what I did for others, especially my children. When Thomas died, I'd clung even tighter to that identity, terrified of who I might be without it. But where had it gotten me? Alone on Christmas with a fortune in my pocket and no one to share it with. Maybe it was time to find out who Patricia Bennett really was, underneath all those roles. The lottery office was closed for the holidays, which gave me 7 days to make a plan before claiming my winnings. 7 days to decide what kind of wealthy woman I wanted to be. I spent that week in an almost trance-like state, moving through my empty house with fresh eyes, seeing not just what was there, but what could be. I didn't tell my children about the win, not right away. Instead, I called Nancy, my oldest friend from college who had moved to Arizona years ago. We'd drifted apart after Thomas died, our monthly calls dwindling to Christmas cards and occasional social media comments. But she answered on the second ring, her familiar laugh washing over me like a warm wave when I told her my news. "Holy hell, Patty, are you serious? 237 million? As a heart attack, I said, then winced at my own poor choice of words. Nancy didn't miss a beat. So what are you going to do? Buy a private island? Travel the world? Throw cash from the rooftops? I settled deeper into my couch, suddenly certain of my answer. I'm going to find out who I am when I'm not just somebody's mother. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough for me to worry I'd said something wrong. Then Nancy's voice returned, softer now. It's about damn time, Patricia Bennett. We talked for 3 hours that night, longer than I'd spoken to anyone since Thomas's funeral. About regrets and second chances. About how we'd both gotten lost in the identities we'd built around other people. About how it's never too late to find yourself again. By the time we hung up, I'd made 3 decisions. First, I would claim the lottery winnings anonymously through a trust, keeping my name out of the news. Second, I would not tell my children, immediately. And third, I would accept Nancy's invitation to spend New Year's with her in Sedona. It'll be healing, she promised. Red rocks, spiritual energy, copper-tinted sunsets. You can decompress before figuring out your next move. 2 days later, I found myself stepping off a plane in Phoenix, the dry desert air a shock after Ohio's winter chill. Nancy met me at the baggage claim, her silver hair now cut in a stylish bob, turquoise jewelry adorning her neck and wrists. She looked vibrant, alive in a way that made me suddenly conscious of my own sensible bob and plain beige sweater. "The last time I saw you was at Thomas's funeral," she said as we hugged. Then she held me at arm's length, studying my face. "You look tired, Patty." "I am tired," I admitted, "down to my bones." She nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. "Well then, let's wake you up." Nancy's adobe-style home sat on a ridge overlooking Cathedral Rock, the desert landscape stretching out in a tapestry of burnt orange and deep green. Floor-to-ceiling windows brought the outside in, and contemporary art adorned every wall, bold, colorful pieces that demanded attention. "You've done well for yourself," I observed, running my hand along a handcrafted dining table that must have cost more than my monthly mortgage. Nancy shrugged. "Divorcing Richard was the best financial decision I ever made." Her eyes twinkled. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That and investing in tech stocks before anyone knew what the internet was. I felt a momentary pang. Nancy and I had started from the same place, 2 art majors with big dreams, sharing a cramped dorm room and secrets deep into the night. Somewhere along the way, she'd continued pursuing her passions while I'd set mine aside. She'd taken risks while I'd sought security. Stop that, Nancy said sharply, interrupting my thoughts. I can see you comparing our lives. Don't. I made my choices. You made yours. Neither of us got it all right. But you seem so... I gestured vaguely at the beautiful home, at her confident presence. Happy? She supplied. I am now, but I paid for it. 2 divorces, estranged from my son for 8 years, breast cancer that I went through completely alone. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than I typically spent on groceries in a week. Everything has a price, Patty. Everything. That night, sitting on Nancy's terrace under a canopy of stars so bright they looked artificial, I confessed my deepest fear. What if I've wasted my life? All those years focused on being the perfect mother, and now my kids can't even be bothered to call on Christmas. Nancy didn't rush to reassure me or dismiss my concern. Instead, she asked, "What would you do differently if you could go back?" The question startled me. No one had asked me that in decades. What I wanted, what I would choose if the choice were truly mine. I would have kept painting, I said finally, the admission feeling like a betrayal and a relief simultaneously. I would have taken that residency in New Mexico that I was offered before I got pregnant with Nora. What else? I would have traveled more, said no more often, not tried so hard to keep everyone happy all the time. The words tumbled out, faster now. I would have fought harder to keep my own identity instead of becoming an extension of everyone else's needs. Nancy nodded, her expression illuminated by the patio lights. And now you have 237 million reasons to do all of that. Is it selfish? I whispered. To want to focus on myself now? Is it selfish for your kids to live their own lives, for them to put themselves first? She leaned forward. The problem isn't that you want to find yourself, Patty. It's that you're the only one who thinks you need permission. I stayed in Sedona for 10 days, the longest I'd been away from home since my honeymoon. Nancy introduced me to her friends, artists, writers, retired executives who'd reinvented themselves in the desert. People who asked about my interests rather than my children, who listened when I tentatively mentioned my abandoned art career. On my 3rd day there, Nancy took me to a small art supply store tucked between a crystal shop and a cafe. I don't paint anymore, I protested as she loaded canvases and paints into a basket. Exactly why we're here. She handed me a set of brushes that cost more than I would have ever spent on myself. Consider it an advance on your lottery winnings. That afternoon, I set up on Nancy's terrace, a blank canvas before me, mountains in the distance. My first attempts were hesitant, awkward, 3 decades of creative atrophy evident in every brushstroke. But by the 4th day, something shifted. Colors began flowing, muscle memory returning. Not great art, certainly, but mine. Authentically, imperfectly mine. While I painted, I thought about my children, about the complicated, messy reality of our relationship that I'd been unwilling to acknowledge, how I'd smothered them with a love that came with invisible strings attached, how I'd martyred myself on the altar of motherhood and then resented them for not appreciating the sacrifice. On New Year's Eve, surrounded by Nancy's friends in her beautiful home, I made a resolution that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I would use my lottery winnings to build a life that was genuinely mine, not defined by my relationships to others. And I would be honest, brutally, uncomfortably honest, with my children about why they had pulled away from me. I returned to Ohio on January 3rd to claim my winnings and set my plan in motion. With Nancy's help, I'd assembled a team of financial advisors, attorneys, and accountants to help navigate my new reality. I opted for the lump sum payment, $142 million before taxes, and established the Phoenix Trust, named not for the city, but for the mythical bird reborn from ashes. My children called on January 7th, all 3 within hours of each other. I'd been home for 4 days without reaching out to them, and their concern felt performative. Too little too late. Mom, are you okay? I tried calling on New Year's, but it went straight to voicemail, Nora said, her typical no-nonsense tone tinged with irritation rather than genuine worry. I was in Arizona with Nancy, I replied, enjoying her momentary silence. I never went anywhere spontaneously. Nancy from college? But you haven't seen her in years. I decided it was time to change that. The conversations with Daniel and Eliza followed similar patterns. Surprise that I'd traveled without telling them, thinly veiled relief that I wasn't calling with a crisis for them to solve, and quick pivots to their own busy lives once they'd confirmed I was fine. I didn't mention the lottery. Not yet. Instead, I spent January transforming my life with surgical precision. I hired a real estate agent to help me sell the Colonial, the house that had become both shrine and prison. I rented a modern apartment in the city's arts district as my temporary home. I enrolled in art classes at the local university, not as a degree-seeking student, but as someone reclaiming a lost piece of herself. Each step felt like removing a heavy coat I'd been wearing for decades, one I hadn't realized was weighing me down until I took it off. The newfound lightness was almost dizzying. Of course, changes this dramatic didn't go unnoticed. My children's responses unfolded like a case study in their personalities. Nora, the surgeon, approached it like a diagnosis. Are you having some kind of breakdown, Mom? This behavior isn't like you at all. Maybe we should get you evaluated. Daniel, the peacekeeper, tried to be supportive while clearly concerned. If selling the house makes you happy, that's great. Just don't make any decisions you can't take back, okay? But it was Eliza, my youngest, who surprised me. She called after the others had reported back, her voice tentative. Mom? Daniel said you're selling the house and taking art classes. That's right, I confirmed, bracing for another lecture. Instead, she said softly, That's really brave. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It doesn't feel brave. It feels necessary. Same thing sometimes, she replied. Then, after a pause, I'd like to see your artwork sometime, if you want to show me. It was the first genuine connection I'd felt with any of my children in years. A moment of seeing and being seen. A tiny crack in the wall between us. February arrived with a letter from my attorney confirming that my lottery win had been successfully processed through the trust, the funds deposited and distributed according to my instructions. The Phoenix Trust now held $86 million after taxes, with another $10 million discreetly transferred to my personal accounts. It was time for the next phase of my plan. I invited all 3 children to meet me in Chicago, Daniel's city, on February 15th. I framed it as a belated family Christmas, a chance to exchange the gifts that still sat wrapped in boxes in my storage unit. To my surprise, all 3 agreed without protest. We met at an upscale restaurant overlooking Millennium Park, snow falling gently outside floor-to-ceiling windows. My children arrived together, having coordinated their flights and shared an Uber from the airport. They looked so adult, so polished. So much like a family unit that functioned perfectly well without me at its center. The realization didn't hurt as much as it once might have. I'd arrived early, secured a private dining room, and dressed with intention. A deep burgundy wrap dress that Nancy had helped me select. Silver jewelry that made a statement without trying too hard. My hair freshly cut in a style that framed my face rather than hiding it. Their surprise when they saw me was almost comical. Mom? Daniel recovered first, leaning in to kiss my cheek. You look amazing. Thank you. I accepted the compliment without deflection or self-deprecation, another new habit I was cultivating. Nora studied me with the critical eye of someone looking for symptoms. You've lost weight. About 15 pounds, I confirmed. Daily walks and less stress will do that. Eliza simply hugged me, whispering, I like your haircut, before taking her seat. Throughout the appetizers and main course, I let them dominate the conversation. Nora's challenging cases, Daniel's promotion, Eliza's frustrations with her micromanaging boss. I listened with genuine interest, asking questions that went beyond surface politeness. But I also observed the dynamics between them, the inside jokes and shorthand references that excluded me, the way they unconsciously protected each other from my inquiries. They had built their own family circle, one where I stood firmly on the outside. When dessert arrived, Nora finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So, Mom, what's this all about? The mysterious invitation? The private dining room?" She gestured around us. "This isn't exactly your style." "Maybe my style is changing," I replied, taking a sip of my wine. "But you're right. I did ask you here for a specific reason." I reached into my purse and removed a manila envelope, placing it on the table between us. "What's that?" Daniel asked, curiosity battling with wariness. "Before I tell you, I need to ask you something important." I looked at each of them in turn. "And I need you to be completely honest, even if you think the truth will hurt me." They exchanged glances, that silent communication again, before Nora spoke for the group. "Okay." I took a deep breath. "Why didn't you come home for Christmas?" The question hung in the air, unexpected and uncomfortable. They'd assumed I'd accepted their excuses, that the subject was closed. "Mom, we explained," Daniel began, but I held up my hand. "No. Not the reasons you gave me. The real reasons." My voice remained calm, but firm. "Why have all three of you been pulling away for years? Why do your visits get shorter and less frequent? Why do our conversations stay surface level? What happened to us?" The silence stretched to breaking point before Eliza surprisingly spoke first. "You want honesty? Fine. It's exhausting being around you, Mom." Her voice trembled slightly. "Everything is always about how much you've sacrificed for us, how empty your life is now that we're gone. It's like we're supposed to feel guilty for growing up, for having our own lives." Nora nodded, emboldened by her sister's candor. "Every conversation turns into how lonely you are, how the house is too big, how you don't know what to do with yourself now. It's emotional quicksand. We can never give enough to fill the void Dad left. And when we try to suggest solutions," Daniel added gently, "you shoot them down. Join a club. You're too tired. Travel, too expensive. Move to a smaller place, too many memories. It's like you want to stay miserable." Their words cut deep, but there was truth in them I couldn't deny. I'd become a black hole of need after Thomas died, pulling at them with the gravitational force of my grief and loneliness. "Thank you for being honest," I said finally. "You're right. I've been unfair to all of you. I made my whole identity about being your mother, and when you didn't need that anymore, I didn't know who I was. I expected you to fill a void that was never yours to fill." The surprise on their faces at my acknowledgement was telling. They'd expected defensiveness, tears, guilt trips, our usual dysfunctional dance. "That's actually really self-aware, Mom," Nora said cautiously. I smiled. "I've had some time to reflect." I tapped the envelope on the table, which brings me to why I asked you here today. I slid the envelope toward them. This might come as a shock. Daniel, sitting closest, opened it and removed the documents inside. Bank statements, trust paperwork, the lottery claim confirmation. His eyes widened as he scanned the pages. Are these numbers real?" "Completely real," I confirmed. "I won the lottery on Christmas Day, $237 million, $142 million lump sum, $86 million after taxes." Nora snatched the papers from her brother, her expression cycling through disbelief, shock, and something like awe as she verified the information. "Mom," Eliza whispered, "you're a millionaire. You're a multimillionaire." "Yes," I said simply. "I am." "Why didn't you tell us right away?" Daniel asked, the hurt in his voice unmistakable. And here was the moment of truth, the reason for this elaborate meeting. Because I needed to know who I was apart from being your mother before I told you. I needed to make decisions about this money as Patricia Bennett, not just as your mom. I let that sink in before continuing. The money is life-changing, but it doesn't fix what's broken between us. You stayed away at Christmas because our relationship had become unhealthy. Before any lottery ticket, before any millions. Money would only have papered over those cracks. Nora, ever practical, cut to the chase. So what does this mean? For all of us? It means several things. I straightened the silverware in front of me, a nervous habit. First, I've established college funds for any children you might have in the future. Second, I've paid off all. Your student loans and any outstanding mortgages. Their expressions relaxed slightly, anticipation replacing wariness. But, I continued, the bulk of the money will remain in the Phoenix Trust, which I control. I'll be using it to build the life I want, to travel, to paint, to learn, to experience everything I put aside while raising you. And us? Eliza asked quietly. Where do we fit in that life? I reached across the table and took her hand, then extended my other hand to include Daniel and Nora in the gesture. That depends on what kind of relationship we want to build, not the old one that wasn't working for any of us, but maybe something new, something healthier, something based on who we really are, not just the roles we're supposed to play. Daniel squeezed my hand. I'd like that. Nora, ever the hardest to read, studied me for a long moment. So what's the first step in this new relationship? I smiled. I'm going to Florence for 3 months to study art restoration. I leave next week. I'd love for each of you to visit me there, separately, on your own schedules. No obligations, no guilt. Just if you want to get to know the woman your mother is becoming. The shock on their faces made me laugh, a genuine, unrestrained sound that felt foreign and wonderful in my mouth. Florence? Nora repeated. By yourself? Well, Nancy's joining me for the first month, I admitted. But yes, largely by myself. The conversation flowed more easily after that, their questions about my plans coming from genuine curiosity rather than judgment. As we prepared to leave, Eliza hung back until her siblings had moved ahead. Mom, she said softly, I'm proud of you. I know that might sound strange coming from your daughter, but I am. I felt tears prick at my eyes. That means more than you know. As we parted on the sidewalk outside, hugs and promises to stay in touch exchanged, I watched my 3 children walk away toward their shared Uber. They were laughing about something, their breath visible in the cold Chicago air, 3 adults with their own complex lives. I didn't feel the usual pang of exclusion. Instead, I felt something new. Hope. Hope that we might find our way back to each other, not as mother and children bound by obligation and guilt, but as 4 distinct individuals who genuinely wanted to be in each other's lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Nancy. How did it go? I smiled as I typed my response. They're shocked. I'm free. Both feel right. 3 months later, I stood in my apartment in Florence, morning light spilling through tall windows onto an easel where my latest painting, a study of the Arno River at sunset, was taking shape. The sounds of the city drifted up from the street below, scooters, animated Italian conversations, the distant bell from Santa Croce. My phone chimed with a video call. Nora's face appeared on the screen, her usually tightly controlled expression relaxed into something approaching excitement. I booked my flight, she announced without preamble. I'll be there next Thursday for 10 days. Is that still good for you? It's perfect, I replied, angling the phone to show her the view from my window. I can't wait to show you everything. After we hung up, I returned to my painting, adding touches of gold to the water's surface where it reflected the setting sun. The piece wasn't perfect, my technique still rusty, my confidence still developing, but it was authentically mine. Just like this new life I was creating, one brushstroke at a time. The path forward with my children remained uncertain. Healing would take time, honesty, and effort from all sides. But for the first time in decades, I was approaching our relationship from a position of wholeness rather than desperate need. The money had created the opportunity, but the real change, the transformation that had truly shocked my children, came from within me. From the decision to finally, unapologetically claim my own life. As the golden light of a Florentine afternoon bathed my small studio in warmth, I added my signature to the bottom corner of the canvas, Patricia Bennett. Not someone's mother, not someone's widow, just Patricia, flawed, complex, and finally, beautifully, herself. The Italian spring unfolded around me like a Renaissance painting coming to life. Florence in April was everything I'd imagined during those long Ohio winters when travel existed only in dog-eared guidebooks on my nightstand. Mornings began with espresso at a small cafe where the barista, Matteo, had stopped asking for my order after the first week. He'd simply nod and prepare my macchiato, occasionally practicing his English while I butchered his beautiful language. In return, I settled into a routine that felt wonderfully unroutine. Art restoration classes 3 mornings a week, painting in my sun-drenched apartment studio during golden afternoon hours, and evening walks along the Arno, watching the city transform as sunset gilded its ancient stones. Weekends were for exploration. Small towns accessible by train, local markets, museums I'd only read about in art history books decades ago. Nancy had returned to Arizona after our first month together, leaving me truly on my own for the first time in my adult life. The solitude that had once terrified me now felt spacious rather than empty. I was learning to enjoy my own company, to trust my instincts, to make decisions based solely on my own desires rather than calculating how they might affect everyone else first. My small apartment was beginning to reflect this inner transformation. I'd rented it furnished, but gradually added touches that spoke to my emerging aesthetic. Colorful textiles from local artisans, fresh flowers from the market, and my own paintings propped against walls or hanging in simple frames. Not preserved for some future exhibition, but enjoyed in the present moment. Then Nora arrived, wheeling her meticulous carry-on suitcase through the arrivals gate at Florence Airport. Even in travel clothes, my eldest daughter projected the same controlled competence that made her an excellent surgeon. Hair secured in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup applied with precision, posture that defied 12 hours of flight-induced discomfort. "Mom," she said, her professional composure momentarily cracking as we embraced. She pulled back, examining me with clinical attention. "You look different." I smiled, recognizing the adjustment happening behind her eyes as she reconciled. The mother she remembered with the woman standing before her. My hair was shorter, highlighted with subtle caramel tones that brightened my face. I'd lost 20 pounds now, my clothes chosen for style rather than practicality. Today, a flowing linen dress in terracotta that complemented the Italian sunshine. "Good different or concerning different?" I teased, taking her smaller bag. "Just different," she hedged, but her expression had softened. "You seem more present." "Being present is exactly what I'm practicing," I replied as we walked toward the taxi stand. 3 months of learning to be exactly where I am instead of worrying about where I should be. The taxi ride into Florence offered Nora her first glimpse of Tuscany's rolling landscape, gradually giving way to the compact beauty of the ancient city. I watched her taking it all in, her analytical mind cataloging details, comparing reality to whatever research she'd inevitably done before. Her trip. "You actually live here," she said finally, a note of wonder breaking through her typically practical tone. For now, I confirmed, though I've extended my lease through summer. She turned from the window, surprise evident. You're staying. Longer? I thought this was a 3-month thing. Life is full of surprises lately, I replied lightly. I'm following my interests where they lead. The slight furrow between her brows, so like her father's when confronted with the unexpected, suggested this extension conflicted with whatever mental timeline she'd constructed for my phase. My apartment building, a converted 17th century palace with modern amenities discreetly tucked behind restored facades, drew an appreciative murmur even from my hard-to-impress daughter. As we climbed the marble staircase to the 3rd floor, I felt a momentary flash of nervousness. Would she see my new home as frivolous? Would my paintings seem amateurish to her accomplished eyes? I unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped aside, allowing Nora to enter first. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating the space I'd come to love. High ceilings with original beams, terracotta floors softened by colorful rugs, the small balcony overlooking a hidden courtyard where an ancient magnolia tree erupted in pink blossoms. Nora moved slowly through the space, taking in the details, the easel positioned to catch the northern light, canvases in various stages of completion propped against walls, art books stacked on the coffee table, a half-finished glass of Chianti next to an open journal. "This is really you," she said finally, the statement somewhere between question and realization. "It's becoming me," I corrected gently. She approached one of my larger paintings, a vibrant interpretation of the Ponte Vecchio at sunset, the ancient bridge's reflection fracturing in the river below. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but her fingers hovered near the canvas as if drawn to touch the textured surface. "You're actually good," she said, surprise coloring her tone. I knew you painted before we were born, but you assumed it was a hobby, not a passion," I finished for her. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I don't think I ever really thought about it. Neither did I for a very long time. I moved to the small kitchen to prepare coffee. That's changing now. Over the next few days, Nora and I established a tentative rhythm. Mornings began with pastries from the bakery downstairs and coffee on the balcony, planning the day ahead. I took her to my favorite spots, the restoration workshop where I studied, hidden courtyards tourists rarely discovered, a family-owned trattoria where the owner greeted me by name and brought us specialties without menus. I watched my daughter, gradually unwinding, layer by layer, like one of the ancient paintings being carefully restored in my workshop. The constant tension she carried in her shoulders eased slightly. Her practiced efficiency gave way to moments of genuine curiosity. She asked questions about my techniques, my teachers, the history of buildings we passed. On her 4th evening, as we shared a bottle of wine at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Duomo, she finally broached the subject I'd been waiting for. "Daniel told me you're giving him money to start his own architectural firm." I sipped my wine, enjoying how the local Sangiovese complemented our meal. "I'm investing in his talent, yes." "And you've paid off Eliza's student loans." "I have." Nora set her glass down carefully. "But you haven't offered me anything." There it was, the perceived inequity, the calculation of maternal love expressed through financial support. I'd anticipated this conversation from the moment I'd revealed my winnings. "What would you want from me, Nora?" I asked quietly. "You're already successful. Your practice is thriving. You make more money than most people dream of." That's not the point," she said, voice tightening. "It's about fairness." I considered her, my firstborn, my overachiever, the one who'd always needed to prove herself best at everything. "Is it really about the money? Or is it about what the money represents?" Her eyes flickered away toward the illuminated dome dominating the skyline. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." I leaned forward. You've never needed my financial support. What you've wanted is my acknowledgement, my approval. You've been competing for it your entire life, with your siblings, with your own impossible standards, with everyone around you. That's not. It is, I said gently. And I'm partly to blame. I expected so much from you as my first child. I put pressure on you that I never put on Daniel or Eliza. I used your accomplishments to measure my success as a mother. The truth of it lingered between us, uncomfortable but necessary. Nora stared at her plate, composure wavering. I thought having money would make everything easier, she said finally, that when you won the lottery, our family's issues would just dissolve. Money magnifies what's already there, I replied. It doesn't fix what's broken. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. So what am I supposed to do with that? Just accept that Daniel and Eliza get financial help while I get… What? A psychological evaluation? I smiled at her characteristic bluntness. What do you actually want? Nora? Not what you think you should want, or what would seem fair. What would actually make your life better, richer, more fulfilled? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, genuinely at a loss. You don't have to answer now, I said. But think about it. Really think. Because when you figure it out, that's what I want to give you. Whether it costs $10 or $10 million. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found her sitting on the balcony, stars visible in patches between Florence's medieval towers. She'd changed into pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger and more vulnerable than she allowed herself to appear during daylight hours. I always thought Dad loved Daniel and Eliza more, she said without preamble as I joined her. They were easier to love, Daniel with his easygoing nature, Eliza with her creativity and warmth. I was always too intense, too driven, too much. I felt a pang of maternal pain that she'd carried this belief for decades. Your father adored you, Nora. He was in awe of your determination, your intelligence. He never said that. He should have. I pulled my robe tighter against the night air. We both should have said so many things. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable now, but contemplative. I know what I want, she said finally. Tell me. Time. Her voice caught slightly. I want time away from the pressure, the constant demands. I haven't taken more than a week off since my residency. I'm burning out, Mom. I love surgery, but I'm drowning in it. The admission seemed to cost her, this acknowledgement of a crack in her perfect professional facade. What would you do with that time? I asked. She gestured toward the city spread, below us. This. Travel. See the world without rushing through it between conferences. Maybe. Maybe even paint a little. She glanced sideways at me. I used to draw in high school. Did you know that? I shook my head, ashamed to realize how much of my daughter's life had remained hidden from me, how much I'd projected onto her rather than truly seeing her. I was good, but I didn't pursue it because it seemed… She trailed off. Impractical? I supplied. Not serious enough? She nodded. I wonder sometimes who I might have been if I'd made different choices. I reached for her hand, finding it cold in the night air. It's never too late to find out. The next morning, I called my financial advisor in the States, while Nora still slept, jet lag finally catching up with her. By the time she emerged, yawning and rumpled, I had papers waiting on the kitchen counter beside a fresh cappuccino. What's this? She asked, picking up the folder. A sabbatical fund, I explained. 1 year of your current salary, plus travel expenses, health insurance, and a housing stipend. Enough for you to take time without financial worry. She flipped through the documents, her expression oscillating between disbelief and something like fear. I can't just leave my practice for a year. You can if you want to, I countered. You've been a surgeon for 8 years. You've earned a break. Your patients will survive with other capable doctors while you remember how to live. What if I forget how to operate? Real anxiety edged her voice. What if you come back better than before because you're rested and inspired instead of exhausted? I challenged. What if taking this time makes you not just a better surgeon, but a happier person? She closed the folder, fingers lingering on its edge. I don't know if I'm brave enough to do this. I smiled, recognizing the echo of my own fears when I first contemplated changing my life. You're the bravest person I know, Nora. You cut into human bodies and repair them. Taking time to repair yourself requires the same courage. The remainder of her visit transformed after that conversation. Something had shifted between us. A new honesty. A willingness to see and be seen beyond our habitual roles. We visited galleries and she spoke about the art with surprising knowledge. We took a day trip to Siena where she photographed architectural details with an artist's eye. She even sat beside me one afternoon, awkwardly attempting a simple still life while I worked on my Arno landscape. On her final evening, as we shared a home-cooked meal in my apartment, she raised her glass in a toast. To the mother I never knew I had, she said, her usual sardonic tone softened with genuine affection. And the one I'm just beginning to discover. I blinked back unexpected tears. To beginnings, I replied. After Nora left, the apartment felt different, not empty, but expanded somehow, as if our conversations had created new space for possibility. I missed her with a cleaner, healthier ache than the desperate loneliness I'd felt in Ohio. Daniel arrived 2 weeks later, his girlfriend Layla unexpectedly accompanying him, a last-minute addition he'd nervously texted about 3 days before. Their flight. I welcomed the change of plans, curious to meet the woman my middle child had been dating for nearly 2 years, but had never brought home while Thomas was alive. They arrived like a burst of energy. Daniel with his ever-present smile and easy laugh, Layla with bright eyes and questions tumbling out faster than I could answer them. Where Nora had approached Florence with methodical appreciation, these two bounded through the city with enthusiastic wonder, finding joy in every cobblestone and gelato shop. Your home is incredible, Mrs. Bennet, Layla gushed as she explored. My apartment, her architect's eye clearly appreciating the historical details. Patricia, please, I corrected. And thank you. It feels more like home than anywhere I've lived in decades. Daniel observed our interaction with barely concealed relief. I realized he'd been worried about my reaction to Layla, perhaps because of her youth. She was at least 5 years his junior. Perhaps because of her evident difference from the type of women I'd hinted he should settle down with in the past. Over dinner at a neighborhood restaurant, I learned more about their relationship. They'd met at an architectural conference where Layla, still finishing her master's degree, had impressed Daniel with her innovative approach to sustainable urban design. They'd maintained a long-distance relationship between Chicago and Boston for nearly a year before she finally accepted a position at his firm. And now we're starting our own practice, Daniel explained, his expression brightening. We've already secured 3 clients thanks to your investment, including a community center in South Chicago, Layla added, her passion evident. It's a neglected area that desperately needs thoughtful redevelopment that serves the existing community instead of displacing them. I watched them as they talked, heads bent together over Layla's phone as she showed me preliminary sketches. Their complementary energy was palpable, Daniel's practical expertise balancing her visionary idealism, her enthusiasm pulling him toward projects with deeper purpose than the commercial work he'd been stuck designing. You make a good team, I observed, pouring more wine for all of us. Daniel looked up, a peculiar expression crossing his face. We do, don't we? He glanced at Layla, something unspoken passing between them. Actually, Mom, we have some news. My heart skipped a beat. the automatic maternal response to those words. Layla extended her left hand, where a delicate ring now adorned her finger. We got engaged last month. We were waiting to tell you in person. We're getting married in October, Daniel added. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. I felt a constellation of emotions, joy for their happiness, a reflexive sadness that Thomas wouldn't be there to see his son married, and something more complex. The recognition that my children's lives had continued evolving during the years. I'd been lost in grief and martyrdom. I'm so happy for you both, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze their entwined hands. Truly. Later, after Layla had gone to bed, jet-lagged and slightly tipsy from the wine, Daniel joined me on the balcony. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the courtyard below, the sounds of distant conversation and music drifting from neighboring apartments. You really like her, he said, halfway between question and statement. I do, I confirmed. She's lovely, and she clearly adores you. He relaxed against the balcony railing. I was worried you might think she's too young or too idealistic. The old me might have, I admitted. But I'm learning to appreciate idealism. And youth isn't a character flaw, just a different perspective. He studied me in the dim light. You really have changed. Is that so hard to believe? Kind of, yeah. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture straight from childhood that made my heart constrict with sudden tenderness. You were always so fixed. In your opinions, your expectations, your way of doing things. Fixed, I repeated, tasting the word, like something solid and immovable, or like something broken that needed repair. Maybe both, he said softly. After Dad died, you became so rigid, like if you bent even a little, you might shatter completely. The observation was painfully accurate. I had clung to routines, traditions, expectations, as if they were life preservers in the ocean of grief. I was afraid, I admitted. Terrified, actually. Your father was my anchor for so long that when he was gone, I didn't know how to navigate without him. Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. I get that. But it was like you expected us to become your new anchors, to organize our lives around keeping you stable. That's a lot of pressure, Mom. Too much, I acknowledged. It wasn't fair to any of you. We stood in companionable silence, the admission lingering between us without the sting it might once have carried. Can I ask you something? He said finally. About the money? I braced myself, wondering if this conversation would echo the one with Nora. Of course. Are you happy? Not because of what the money can buy, but has it made you happier? The question surprised me with its simplicity and depth. I considered it seriously before answering. The money didn't make me happy, I said slowly. It made me free. Free to discover what actually does make me happy. I gestured toward the beautiful city spread around us. This makes me happy. Creating art makes me happy. Learning makes me happy. Meeting new people without the weight of grief and neediness hanging around my neck, that makes me happy. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. Good. I was worried about? That you'd spend it all trying to fill some void, or that people would take advantage of you. I laughed softly. I'm not as fragile as you all thought. Or maybe I was, but I'm not anymore. He reached out, tentatively placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Mom. That sounds weird to say to your parent, but I am. The simple statement warmed me more than he could know. For so long, I'd measured my worth by my children's accomplishments, taking pride in their achievements as reflections of my parenting. Now, for the first time, one of my children was expressing pride in me as a person distinct from my maternal role. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. The next week unfolded in a whirlwind of activities. Daniel and Layla wanted to experience everything, from dawn visits to markets to late nights at local jazz clubs. Their energy was infectious, pulling me into experiences I might not have sought out on my own. I found myself dancing at a riverside bar one evening, laughing as Daniel spun me in clumsy circles while Layla cheered us on. When they left, promising to send wedding details soon, the apartment felt different again, brightened somehow by their youthful enthusiasm, their unworried approach to the future. I found myself incorporating small changes into my routine, trying new restaurants alone, striking up conversations with strangers in museums, saying yes to invitations that once would have intimidated me. Eliza arrived in late May, my youngest bringing with her the changeable weather of spring. Sunshine one moment, unexpected showers the next. Where her siblings had arrived with clear expectations and schedules, Eliza came with an open-ended ticket and a battered backpack. "I quit my job," she announced as we walked from the airport bus to my apartment. Right before I left, just walked into my nightmare boss's office and said I was done. I glanced at her, noting the shadows under her eyes but also the determined set of her jaw. That sounds liberating and terrifying. Both, she agreed, hefting her backpack higher. I have no idea what I'm doing next. Is that okay? The question caught me off guard, not just the content but the underlying vulnerability. Of my 3 children, Eliza had always seemed the most independent, the least concerned with my approval. "Of course it's okay," I said. "Sometimes the best next step is the one you haven't planned." She shot me a sideways glance. "That's not what you would have said 6 months ago." "No," I agreed. "It's not." At the apartment, Eliza settled in with the easy adaptability that had always characterized her. Unlike her siblings, who had maintained a certain distance, she immediately curled up on my couch with a book from my shelf, kicked off her shoes, and asked if we could order pizza for dinner. The casual intimacy was both refreshing and slightly disconcerting after years of more formal interactions. As we shared pizza and wine that evening, Eliza observed me with the penetrating attention she'd inherited from her father. "You seem at peace," she said finally. "It's weird." I laughed. "Weird good or weird concerning?" "Just different." She tucked her feet under her on the couch. "You were always so busy, like you couldn't sit still or the grief might catch up with you." Once again, I was struck by how clearly my children had seen through my coping mechanisms, even as I thought I was keeping everything together. "Grief has a way of finding you regardless," I said. "I've learned it's better to sit with it than to run from it." She nodded, understanding in her eyes that seemed beyond her years. "I still miss Dad all the time. Sometimes I'll think of something funny he'd appreciate, and I reach for my phone before remembering I can't text him." "Me too," I admitted, "but the missing has changed shape. It's not the raw wound it was at first." "What shape is it now?" I considered the question, appreciating her poet's curiosity about emotional landscapes. "It's like a stone I carry, smooth from handling, familiar in weight. I notice it's there, but it doesn't stop me from moving forward anymore." She smiled, a hint of sadness at the edges. "That's beautiful, Mom." Over the next days, I discovered a different rhythm with Eliza than I'd found with her siblings. Where Nora needed structure and Daniel craved activity, Eliza sought conversation and connection. We spent long mornings at cafes discussing books and art, afternoons wandering museums without agendas, evenings cooking together in my small kitchen with local ingredients from the market. On her 5th day, as we sketched together in the Boboli Gardens, she broached the subject I'd been waiting for. "Nora called me after her visit," she said, pencil moving across her paper in fluid strokes. "She says you're different, more yourself, somehow." "Is that possible?" I asked. "To be more yourself?" Eliza looked up from her drawing. "I think we're all versions of ourselves, some more authentic than others." She returned to her sketch. Nora's considering taking a sabbatical. Did you know that? She mentioned it was a possibility. That's not like her at all. She's been programmed since medical school to believe that taking time off is for the weak. Eliza's tone held no judgment, just observation. Whatever you said to her must have resonated. I shrugged, focusing on capturing the curve of a cypress tree. I just asked her what would make her happier. She fell silent for a moment. Daniel and Layla postponed their wedding, by the way. This was news to me. Why? They're taking 6 months to travel. Architectural research, they're calling it. But really, they just want to see the world together before settling into their new firm. She glanced at me. He said you inspired them. A warm feeling spread through my chest. Not pride exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd somehow contributed to my children's expansion rather than their constraint. And you? I asked gently. What would make you happier, Eliza? She set down her pencil, gazing out at the Renaissance garden spread before us. I've never been unhappy exactly, just restless. Like I've been trying on different lives waiting for one to fit. And has any fit so far? Not completely. She turned to face me directly. But I've been thinking about going back to school, for creative writing. I've been writing poetry since college, publishing a little in literary journals, but I've never taken it seriously. Why not? She laughed softly. Because it's not a real job, as you and Dad used to say. Because artists don't get health insurance. Because adults are supposed to be practical. The echo of attitudes I'd once espoused so firmly made me wince. I was wrong, I said simply. About so many things. Not wrong exactly. Her expression softened. Just limited by your own experiences, your own fears. We all are. In that moment, I saw my youngest child with new clarity. Not just as the free spirit I'd sometimes dismissed or worried over, but as a deeply thoughtful woman with wisdom that had nothing to do with age or conventional success. Would you show me your poetry? I asked. The request seemed to surprise her. She hesitated, then reached for her backpack, extracting a worn journal. I've never shown these to anyone in the family, she said, handing it over with visible reluctance. Not even Dad. I accepted the journal with appropriate reverence, understanding the trust inherent in the gesture. As I began to read the first poem, a haunting piece about her father's hands as he worked in his garden, I felt a door opening between us, one that had been closed for far too long. That evening, over dinner at my favorite trattoria, Eliza asked the question I'd been expecting since her arrival. So what happens when your time here is up? When the money runs out or the adventure gets old? I sipped my wine, considering. The money won't run out if I'm careful. As for adventure. I gazed around the restaurant, at the local families. Sharing meals, the centuries-old walls that had witnessed countless conversations like ours. I'm discovering that adventure isn't just about new places. It's about new ways of seeing, of being. Very philosophical, she teased. But practically speaking, will you come back to Ohio? Buy a condo in Florida? Keep traveling? I don't know yet, I admitted. And I'm learning to be comfortable with that uncertainty. She studied me over her glass. You know what I think? Tell me. I think you should consider teaching. She gestured toward my hands, paint still embedded in the creases despite my scrubbing. Not necessarily in a formal setting, but sharing what you're learning about art, about life reimagined. You're good at it. Better than you were when we were kids, actually. How so? You listen now, she said simply. Before, you were always so busy instructing that you never heard what we were actually saying. Now you listen first, then respond. It makes a difference. Her observation startled me with its accuracy. I had been a directive parent, always ready with answers, solutions, corrections. Listening had seemed passive, inefficient. Now I recognized it as the foundation of genuine connection. Teaching, I mused. I hadn't considered it. Think about it, she urged. You've learned things the hard way that might help others navigate their own transitions. The suggestion lingered with me long after dinner, through the remainder of Eliza's visit and beyond. Teaching not as authority, but as fellow traveler sharing discovered paths. Not instructing, but accompanying. The idea resonated in unexpected ways. When Eliza left, not for home, but for a summer writing workshop in Greece she'd impulsively applied for after our conversation, my apartment felt different once more. Not empty or lonely, but purposeful, as if the space itself had absorbed the transformative conversations with my children and was holding them for me to consider. June brought blistering heat to Florence, turning the ancient stone facades into radiators that released their stored warmth long into the night. My Italian improved enough for real conversations with shopkeepers and neighbors. My paintings evolved, technique refining with daily practice, my own voice emerging more clearly on each canvas. One sweltering afternoon, as I sketched in the relative cool of the Uffizi Gallery, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Daniel's number flashed on the screen. Mom? His voice sounded different, tentative, almost nervous. Are you sitting down? My heart skipped its familiar maternal worry beat. What's happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Layla's pregnant. The world seemed to pause, then rush forward again. Pregnant? But I thought, yeah, we weren't planning on kids for a few years, but apparently, the universe had other ideas. His laugh bubbled through the phone, equal parts terror and joy. You're going to be a grandmother in January. Grandmother. The word settled over me like a familiar coat I'd forgotten in the back of a closet. Comfortable, but slightly restrictive. 6 months ago, this news would have sent me into a frenzy of planning and expectation, of reclaiming my essential role as family matriarch. Now, I felt joy for Daniel and Layla, genuine excitement about meeting this new person they were creating, but also a clear-eyed recognition that this child was their journey, not my second chance or my redemption story. That's wonderful news, I said warmly. How are you both feeling? Terrified, excited, completely unprepared. His voice held a vulnerability I rarely heard from my steady middle child. We're changing all our plans, postponing the wedding until after the baby, rethinking our travel schedule, figuring out how to set up the business with a newborn in the mix. You'll figure it out, I assured him, one day at a time. A pause then. We were hoping you might come back a little earlier than planned. Help us get organized, maybe? Layla's parents are in Australia and, well, we could use your experience. The request touched me deeply. Not because it re-established my necessary role in my children's lives, but because it was presented as a choice, an invitation rather than an obligation or assumption. Of course I'll come, I said, but not to take over or tell you what to do, just to support whatever you decide is right for your family. The distinction seemed important, to both of us. After we hung up, I remained on the gallery bench, the masterpieces surrounding me momentarily forgotten as I absorbed this new development. Grandmother. Another identity to integrate, another role to define on my own terms rather than through others' expectations. I smiled, gathering my sketching materials. Perhaps this was the true gift of my unexpected journey. Not the money itself, not even the freedom it provided, but the opportunity to rewrite the story of who I was and who I might yet become. Not someone defined solely by what I gave to others, but a woman with her own desires and boundaries. Not a supporting character in my children's lives, but the protagonist of my own unfolding narrative. Not just a mother or future grandmother, but Patricia Bennett in full, artist, traveler, student, teacher, still discovering new facets of herself at 58. As I stepped out of the gallery into the brilliant Florentine sunshine, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. Whatever came next, whether in Italy or Ohio or someplace not yet imagined, I would meet it as myself, wholly, authentically myself. And that, more than any lottery winning, was the true jackpot. September. In Ohio painted the landscape in burnished gold and fiery crimson, a sharp contrast to Florence's more subdued autumn palette. I'd returned 3 weeks earlier than planned, not directly to my old life, but to a temporary rental in a downtown arts district, a light-filled loft with enough space for both living and painting. The perfect transitional home while I determined what came next. The lottery money had fundamentally altered my relationship with geography. I was no longer tethered to any particular place by financial necessity or accumulated possessions. My colonial in the suburbs had sold quickly, most of its contents either donated or placed in storage. What remained fit comfortably in my new space, art supplies, books, the few family heirlooms I couldn't bear to part with, and a carefully curated wardrobe that reflected the woman I'd become rather than the one I'd been. Daniel and Layla lived 20 minutes away in a converted warehouse space that served as both home and the headquarters for their fledgling architectural firm. They'd postponed their European travel plans when the pregnancy test came back positive, redirecting their energy into preparing for both a baby and a business. I visited them several times a week, not to hover or direct, but to witness their journey with the appropriate balance of support and distance. "Mom, what do you think of this?" Layla asked one afternoon in early October, showing me fabric swatches for the nursery they were creating in a corner of their open-concept living space. Her pregnancy had just begun to show, a gentle curve beneath the flowing tops she favored. I considered the samples, organic cotton in shades of sage green and warm terracotta, before offering my honest opinion. "They're beautiful, earthy, but sophisticated, just like you two." Her smile was warm, genuine. In the month since our first meeting in Florence, Layla and I had developed an easy relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligatory family ties. "We want the space to grow with the baby," she explained. "Nothing too infantile or gendered." "Smart approach," I agreed. "Children outgrow themed decor faster than they outgrow clothes." Daniel emerged from their home office, architectural plans tucked under his arm. "Speaking of growing," he said, kissing my cheek in greeting, "our client list just expanded again. 2 more sustainable housing projects for next year." I heard the pride in his voice, saw the quiet confidence that had replaced his former people-pleasing anxiety. No longer working under someone else's vision, he was blossoming into the architect, and soon, the father, he wanted to be rather than the one he thought others expected. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely delighted for them both. "You're building something remarkable here." "We couldn't have done it without your investment," he acknowledged. "You could have," I corrected gently. "It just would have taken longer. The talent and vision were always yours." Later, as Daniel walked me to my car, he hesitated before asking the question I could sense had been on his mind. "Have you thought about what you're doing next, now that you're back in Ohio?" I smiled, appreciating his concern, but also the careful way he framed it, as curiosity rather than expectation. "I'm exploring options," I told him. "The Arts Council asked if I'd consider teaching community classes, and Nancy suggested I might want to curate small exhibitions featuring emerging artists." "You'd be good at both," he observed. "You have a natural way of encouraging creativity in others." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the observation. "Whatever I choose, I'm not rushing the decision. That's one luxury the money has given me. Time to discover what feels right." He nodded, understanding in his eyes that would have been absent a year earlier. Just don't disappear on us again, he said, his tone light, but with an undercurrent of real feeling. We've gotten used to having you around. The real you, I mean. The distinction warmed me more than he could know. Nora had indeed taken her sabbatical, a decision that shocked her colleagues and delighted her long-neglected friends. She'd started with a medical volunteer stint in Guatemala, then continued traveling through Central America before landing in Mexico City for a 2-month Spanish immersion program. Her occasional video calls revealed a gradual softening, a woman slowly remembering how to experience life beyond hospital walls. I painted something, she announced during one such call, her image pixelating slightly on my tablet screen. It's terrible, completely amateurish, but I enjoyed it. She angled her phone to show a watercolor landscape, clumsy but earnest, the colors vibrant against the white paper. It's the view from my apartment here, she explained, slight embarrassment coloring her voice. I've been taking a class twice a week. It's wonderful, I said truthfully. Not technically accomplished, but authentic, an expression of genuine curiosity and engagement with her surroundings. I'm thinking of extending my sabbatical, she confessed, lowering her voice though she was alone in her apartment. The hospital called asking when I'm returning, and I realized I'm not ready. Not yet. Then don't, I said simply. The medical world will still be there when you're ready to return, if you choose to return. Her expression shifted. Surprise, replacing uncertainty. You don't think I should go back to surgery? I think you should do whatever brings you alive, I replied. Whether that's surgery or painting or something you haven't discovered yet. The point isn't what you do, Nora. It's how fully present you are while doing it. She considered this, her analytical mind visibly processing. I never thought I'd hear you advocating for such an unstructured approach to life. Neither did I admitted with a laugh. Apparently lottery winnings and complete life upheaval can change a person. It's not just the money, though, is it? Her perception, always sharp, cut to the heart of things. You were changing before you told us about the lottery. Something shifted when Dad turned down your holiday invitation. The observation startled me with its accuracy. The money had accelerated my transformation, provided means and opportunity, but the catalyst had been that moment of clarity on Christmas morning, the recognition that I'd built my identity on quicksand, on roles and relationships that could disappear without warning. You're right, I acknowledged. The lottery was just a tool. The real change started with loss, or rather, with finally facing losses I'd been avoiding for years. Eliza's path took yet another direction. After her summer writing workshop in Greece, she'd been accepted to a prestigious MFA program in creative writing, with the first semester conducted virtually while she traveled. Her latest location was a small coastal town in Portugal, where she'd rented a cottage to work on her first collection of poetry. The program director says I have a distinctive voice, she reported during our weekly phone call. Whatever that means. It means you're not imitating other poets, I suggested. You're writing from your own unique perspective. Maybe. I could picture her characteristic half shrug. Anyway, I've been thinking about what you said about teaching. I'm doing some workshops with local high school students here. English language learning through creative writing. It's challenging, but surprisingly rewarding. You always had a gift for connecting with young people, I observed. Even as a teenager yourself, you knew how to listen in a way that made others feel heard. Unlike some people we know, she teased, obviously referring to her more directive, older sister. Nora's learning, I defended mildly. We all are in our own ways. The conversation drifted to practical matters, her upcoming virtual exhibition of photographs and poems, my plans for the holidays, whether she'd make it back to Ohio for the birth of Daniel's baby. I'll try, she promised. Depends on finances. And the program schedule. Let me help with the flight, I offered. Not as a handout, but as a gift to both you and your brother. Family should be together for important moments when possible. There was a brief silence on the line. You're different about money now, she observed, less rigid. I'm trying to use it as a tool rather than a measure of worth, I explained. It took me too long to realize that my value isn't determined by what I can provide materially, just as your value isn't determined by financial independence. Profound realizations courtesy of the mega millions, she quipped, but I could hear the appreciation in her voice. After we disconnected, I sat in the window seat of my loft, watching autumn light gild the city below. My conversations with my children had evolved so dramatically over the past 10 months that they sometimes felt like exchanges with familiar strangers, people I was getting to know anew, without the distorting lens of maternal expectation or disappointment. I wondered if they felt the same about me, if the woman I was becoming seemed like someone they were just meeting rather than the mother who had raised them. Did they miss the predictable stability of the old Patricia? Or did they appreciate this more authentic version, with all her newly discovered edges and dimensions? Nancy visited in November, her vibrant presence filling my loft with laughter and the scent of the southwestern spices she insisted on using to cook elaborate meals in my minimalist kitchen. We spent evenings sipping wine and comparing notes, on our parallel journeys of reinvention, hers after divorce, mine after widowhood and lottery fortune. Have you dated at all? She asked one night, curled at one end of my sofa while I occupied the other. It's been almost 3 years since Thomas died. The question didn't surprise me. Nancy had always been direct. But my answer surprised us both. I'm not opposed to it, I admitted, but I'm not seeking it either. For the first time in my adult life, I'm enjoying my own company, discovering who I am outside of any relationship. That feels important to honor? She nodded, understanding, in her eyes. Just don't close the door entirely. Companionship can be beautiful when it's chosen from wholeness rather than pursued from emptiness. When did you get so wise? I teased. Around the same time you did, she shot back with a grin. Somewhere between heartbreak and healing. The weeks leading up to Christmas brought a flurry of activity. Daniel and Layla invited everyone for dinner on Christmas Eve, a deliberate reclaiming of the holiday that had marked the beginning of my transformation. Nora flew in from Mexico, bringing handcrafted gifts and a golden tan that softened her usually angular features. Eliza arrived last, rushing from the airport with sand still metaphorically clinging to her shoes from her latest coastal writing, Retreat. My loft became command central for pre-holiday preparations. Not because I insisted on controlling the festivities as I once might have, but because it offered neutral ground where we could all meet without the ghosts of past dynamics haunting our interactions. It's strange being back for Christmas, Nora observed as we prepared platters of appetizers for the evening's gathering. Last year feels like a lifetime ago. It was, I agreed, for all of us. She paused in her methodical arrangement of cheese and fruit. I'm sorry we weren't there for you then, when you needed us. The apology, unexpected and genuine, caught me off guard. Thank you, I said simply. I understand it better now. Why? You all kept your distance. I wasn't easy to be around. Still, she persisted, we could have tried harder. I touched her arm gently. We all did the best we could with the awareness we had at the time. The point isn't to dwell in regret, but to move forward with more consciousness. She shook her head slightly, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. There you go again, sounding like a philosophical guru instead of the mother who used to panic if the napkins didn't match the tablecloth. I laughed, acknowledging the truth in her observation. Life's too short for matching napkins, Nora, but it's exactly the right length for second chances. Daniel and Layla's loft hummed with conversation and laughter that evening, the first Christmas gathering in years that felt like a genuine celebration rather than an obligation fulfilled. Gone were the rigid traditions and performative rituals. That had characterized our holidays during Thomas's life and after his death. In their place was something more organic, more authentic. A family rediscovering how to be together without predetermined roles or expectations. Layla, now visibly pregnant, presided over the eclectic feast with serene confidence. Daniel moved among us with trays of his specialty cocktails and mocktails for his expectant wife. Nora and Eliza, often distant in previous years, engaged in animated conversation about their respective travels. And I observed it all with quiet wonder, no longer anxiously monitoring everyone's happiness or orchestrating their interactions. After dinner, Daniel called for our attention, raising his glass in a toast. To family, he began, his gaze moving around the table. Not the one we were obligated to be, but the one we're choosing to become. To choice, Nora added, lifting her glass to join his. To becoming, Eliza contributed. To love that allows for growth, Layla said softly, one hand resting on her rounded belly. I raised my own glass last, emotion tightening my throat. To all of it, the painful catalyst, the uncertain journey, and this beautiful moment of arrival. As we clinked glasses, I caught Daniel watching me, a question in his eyes. Later, as we gathered coats and prepared to leave, he pulled me aside. You okay, Mom? You seem reflective tonight. I smiled, touched by his perception. I'm more than okay. I was just thinking about last Christmas, sitting alone in the house, discovering the lottery ticket, making the decision not to tell you. All immediately. A best decision you ever made, he said frankly. If you'd told us right away, we'd have fallen right back into our old patterns. You giving, us taking, no one really seeing each other clearly. And now? Now we're learning a new dance, he said, his metaphor surprising and apt. One where we all lead sometimes and follow other times. Where we support each other without suffocating, love each other without demanding. I hugged him, this thoughtful man my son had become. When did you get so wise? I echoed my earlier question to Nancy. I had a good teacher, he replied, returning the embrace. One who showed me it's never too late to grow into yourself. January arrived with swirling snow and the birth of my first grandchild, a girl with Daniel's gentle eyes and Layla's determined chin. They named her Sophia, after Layla's grandmother, with the middle name Grace, that Daniel said reminded him of me. You've carried yourself with such grace through all of this change, he explained as I held the newborn, her tiny weight perfect in my arms. We want her to have that same strength. I gazed down at Sophia's peaceful face, marveling at the perfect miniature features, the delicate eyelashes, the rosebud mouth. Grandmother, a role I had once imagined would define the next chapter of my life, becoming the central focus of my identity just as motherhood had been. Now I recognized it as another rich thread in the tapestry of my existence, precious and meaningful, but not the entire weave. I would love this child fiercely, support her parents wholeheartedly, but I would not define myself solely through her or her relationship to me. That freedom, to love without consuming, to care without controlling, felt like the greatest gift my journey had given me. She's perfect, I whispered, brushing a finger against Sophia's velvet cheek. We think so, Layla agreed from her hospital bed, tired but radiant. Though we're completely terrified, Daniel added with a nervous laugh. How did you manage with 3 of us? I smiled, remembering those early days of parenthood, the exhaustion, the worry, the overwhelming love. One day at a time, I said. Just like everything else that matters. As winter deepened, my path forward began to crystallize. The community art classes I'd started teaching had awakened something unexpected, a genuine passion for helping others discover their creative voices, particularly older adults who, like me, were reimagining their lives after major transitions. "You have a gift for this," the Arts Council director told me after observing one of my workshops. "You meet people exactly where they are, without judgment or pressure." The observation resonated with what both Eliza and Daniel had noted about my evolving approach to relationships, perhaps the skills I was developing in my personal life, listening more than speaking, supporting without directing, honoring individual journeys, translated naturally to teaching. By February, I'd committed to expanding the program, working with the council to establish a series of workshops specifically designed for people in transition, divorcees, recent retirees, widows and widowers, empty nesters. We called it Canvas of Change, and I poured into it everything I'd learned about navigating life's unexpected turns. I established a foundation with a portion of my lottery winnings to make the workshops accessible to those who couldn't afford them, naming it after Thomas with the quiet certainty that he would have approved of this use of our unexpected fortune. Not hoarded or frittered away, but channeled toward helping others find their way through difficult passages. Nora returned from her extended sabbatical in March, not to her former surgical practice as everyone had expected, but to a position with Doctors Without Borders that would use her medical skills while continuing to expand her worldview. She stopped in Ohio before her first international assignment, staying in my guest room for a week that allowed us to deepen the more authentic connection we'd begun building. I probably would have stayed in the same unfulfilling routine forever, if you hadn't shaken everything up, she admitted one evening as we painted side by side in my studio space. Her technique had improved markedly, not professional quality, but expressive and honest. It's strange to think that Dad's death, your lottery win, all of it led to this moment of clarity. Life rarely moves in straight lines, I observed, mixing a particular shade of blue I'd been trying to capture. The most significant growth often comes through the most painful disruptions. She considered this, brush paused mid-stroke. Do you ever regret it? Not the money, obviously, but the upheaval? The way everything familiar had to break before something new could emerge? I thought about the question seriously, giving it the consideration it deserved. I regret the pain my awakening caused all of you, I said finally. But I don't regret the awakening itself. Some cocoons need to be completely shattered before the butterfly can emerge. Poetic, she teased. You've been spending too much time with Eliza? I laughed, accepting the gentle ribbing. Maybe so, but it's true nonetheless. On her last evening before departing for her assignment in Kenya, Nora helped me host a small dinner gathering. Daniel and Layla with baby Sophia, two of my closest, friends from the art workshops, and Nancy, who'd flown in specifically to see Nora before she left. As we shared a meal around my dining table, mismatched plates, uncoordinated napkins, food that prioritized flavor over presentation, I found myself overcome with a sense of fullness that had nothing to do with the excellent meal. This gathering represented everything I'd gained through the painful upheaval of the past year. Authentic relationships, genuine connections, the freedom to be imperfect, the joy of bringing together different elements of my life without anxiety or performance. A toast, Nancy announced, raising her glass. To Patricia, who won the lottery twice, once with a ticket and once by finding herself. Warmth spread through my chest as glasses clinked and eyes turned toward me with genuine affection. The lottery money had changed my external circumstances dramatically, but the real transformation, the one that mattered most, had been internal. The journey from masked perfection to authentic imperfection, from control to surrender, from living for others to living alongside them. As I looked around at these beloved faces, I recognized the true jackpot I'd won. Not millions in a bank account, but the courage to finally become myself, and in doing so, to love others more honestly than ever before. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the loft settled into quiet, I stood at my window watching snowflakes dance in the streetlights below. 1 year ago, I had been a different woman, wounded, resentful, clinging to roles that no longer served me or those I loved. The journey since then had not been easy or straightforward. There had been missteps and difficult conversations, old patterns that resurfaced unexpectedly, new boundaries that required constant reinforcement. The work of transformation was ongoing, never complete. But standing there in the peaceful solitude of my beautiful space, surrounded by evidence of a life now fully claimed, paintings in progress, books chosen for pleasure rather than appearance, photographs of my children in their evolving lives, mementos of travels taken and those still to come, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The lottery ticket had been the catalyst, the external shock that forced me to face essential questions. Who am I when stripped of familiar roles? What do I want when the question is truly mine to answer? How do I love without losing myself in the process? The answers continued to unfold, day by day, choice by choice. Not perfect answers, but authentic ones. Not permanent solutions, but evolving truths. And in that ongoing discovery lay the real treasure, far more valuable than any numbers on a winning ticket. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.